Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 807B, and today's date is November 2nd, 2015, and the title of this episode is Obama is Waging War in Syria Without the Authorization from Congress. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we know the gun grabbers are out there, and they're always pushing their agenda, especially right after one of those false flag mass shootings. And they push the agenda. The president comes right out, tells you gun control, gun control, gun control. Then they have the family members come out, who are mostly actors, come out and say gun control, gun control, gun control. And then they throw out statistics, and of course they manipulate that also. But there was a Pew Research report last week that the murder rate was cut nearly in half from 7 per 100,000 in 1993 to 3.6 per 100,000 in 2013. Over the same period, overall gun deaths, including accidents and suicides, have fallen by one-third from 15.2 to 10.6 per 100,000. In spite of this, Pew reports the American public believes the homicides and the gun deaths are increasing because this is what they're hearing from the corporate media. But when you look at this, the number of privately owned guns in the United States has increased substantially in recent decades, and the homicide rate has gone down. All everyone else is focusing on are these mass shootings in schools and different areas. And those are created on purpose to push legislation. And they're called false flag events. Governments do this quite often. I mean, they told us, like DHS, whenever their budget is coming due or something like that, they'll say, oh my God, ISIS is coming, we have to spy on the people. Then their budget passes and all that information just disappears. The same thing with this. They have gun legislation pending. It's just sitting there waiting. They can't pass it, so they have to push an agenda. But it's getting no traction whatsoever. People are on to them. We know what's going on. I mean, we have Wolfgang Halbig, who is investigating Sandy Hook. And they're blocking him at every single turn. And we know that was a complete false flag event. The school wasn't even operational. And we know, and you know, whenever there's a false flag event, they destroy the evidence very quickly right after. And they always follow the same script. So we can see from everything they've been telling us, it's completely fake, phony, and false. And as we see from the government, they continually lie to the people time and time again. Now we know Obama is bringing in illegals. He wrote an executive order. He had his pen in hand. And he's instructing all the agencies under the executive branch to keep the illegals in the country and give them working papers. Make sure they take out student loan debt. Make sure they take out auto loans. Make sure they sign up for the armed forces. And make sure they get the job in the corporation so the corporations don't have to pay that $3,000 penalty. Now the White House, or I should say Obama, is creating another executive order instructing. Remember, every time he creates an executive order, it only deals with the executive branch. The people do not have to follow this. But his executive order, his latest one, is instructing all federal government agencies to remove admission of criminal history from job applications. You normally when you sign up for a job, have you ever committed a crime, and you have to list what you've done. They pull your records. They're going to pull your records anyhow. But what we're seeing here is a lot of illegals are coming across the border, and they are rapists, they are killers. Some are okay, some have diseases. And this is why we have a checkpoint to do background checks, to make sure that everyone is on the up and up. This is why we have borders. This is why we have the Border Patrol. I mean, we might as well just get rid of the borders then. What's the purpose of them if we're not going to use them? And we're just going to let everyone in. Because that's basically what the president wants to do. And the reason why he wants to push this executive order, because he wants to make sure that all these criminals that are coming into the country, they don't have to put this down on their job application. They don't want anyone looking into this. There's always a reason and there's always a purpose for what they do. And it's always leading back for them keeping this economy continually moving in the direction they want, helping out the central bankers, helping out the corporate people. And the whole thing is a complete lie. Now, out in Afghanistan, we understand the U.S. is not leaving, NATO's not leaving, UK is not leaving. We are never leaving that area. But it's very interesting. A watchdog reported that the U.S. Defense Department spent $43 million of American taxpayer money to build a gas station that normally costs about $500,000. Now, we know it didn't cost $43 million. We know that this money was taken by others, corporations, people on the inside, and most likely that gas station probably wasn't even built, or it's not even operational. And we see this a lot with the government. We saw it during 9/11, where the Pentagon was saying, oh yeah, we don't know where that $6 trillion went. And we always see these things occur. And we always see the government involved in fraudulent acts. Everything they're doing is not for the benefit of the people. It is the benefit for themselves, for the central bankers, the corporate elite. The people are the furthest from their minds. They really don't care. Now, out in Kiev, we see Kiev right now is pulling up 20 tanks, 6 artillery systems to the engagement line in Donbass. And the southeastern people are reporting them to the OSCE, saying yes, they are bringing military equipment back to the front lines. Now we have to remember, the Minsk ceasefire agreement, the Minsk II, expires the end of this year. And we see that Kiev, along with the United States, UK, and other Western countries, they're in their training, their National Guard, their armed forces, and they're really pushing this to the extreme because the Minsk Agreement specifically states that no foreign body can be in Ukraine, especially military, for the purposes of training. And the United States and the rest don't care. And we know that there's no extension right now to the Minsk II agreement. Kiev has not agreed to it yet. And they're continually telling us that there is no other agreement except for this one. So when you look at the situation, it looks like they're going to let it expire, and then they're going to go all out in the south against the southeastern people, because you have to remember, their goal is still the same. They paid a lot of money for Ukraine, $5 billion. They want Crimea back, and they want the southeastern section, because just having the West is kind of a waste. All the production is in the southeastern area. Crimea has the ports. And this is really what they wanted, to control the natural gas going into Europe. Now, out in China, we understand the U.S. just sailed their warships around the Spratly Islands to prove a point and also to provoke China. And China now is basically flying their naval fighter jets over that area to show that, yes, this is ours. Now, of course, why is the United States there? They're not United States islands. It has to do with the Philippines, Vietnam, and the other countries around that area. Why is the United States butting in? Well, you have to remember, everything is connected. And we know the United States right now is deliberately provoking China, and they want to do this because they're trying to push war, because this economy is collapsing. And right now, we understand the yuan is slated to be reserve currency. We understand that China has been hoarding gold. China has deals with Russia. They have bilateral trade agreements all across the world. They sold their first bond out in London. And we know that China has displaced the United States as the world's largest economy. And the powers that be, the United States government, central bankers, realize that the dollar is basically dying. The debt level is continually increasing exponentially, and sooner or later, the dollar will just crash on its own, and there'll be nothing they can do to stop it. And before this happens, they need to start a war. This is why they're trying so hard. So the U.S. is continually having all these naval drills, testing their equipment, ordering new equipment, working with NATO, bringing in military assets all throughout Eastern Europe. And the U.S. military, they just conducted a comprehensive test of its layered missile defense system in the Pacific Ocean. And it didn't go very well. One of the missiles ended up missing the target, and some of them didn't do as well as they thought. But the military said it was a complete success. Now, if you compare this to what Russia did, where they fired their ballistic missiles from the Caspian Sea and hit each one of their targets. Of course, the United States was out there trying to convince everyone they crashed into Iran and they blew up, but this was completely fake, phony, and false. They had no evidence. Iran came out and said, no missiles fell here. Please show us your evidence if you have it. And of course, there's no satellite images. There's no photography. There's absolutely nothing except unnamed sources, which is kind of ridiculous because that's how they do everything. Every time Russia or China or anyone else comes out and says, please prove this, the United States can never prove their propaganda. They just can't do it. And we have all this technology, satellites looking at all these different areas, and they can never show anything because there's nothing to see. And of course, they're trying to convince everyone that Russia does not have reliable, good weapons, but actually, most of their weapons are equal to or better than the United States. Now, we know the United States is in the Middle East. Obama now is bringing in more and more troops. We know a lot of these special op guys, they were already in Syria. And of course, one of the agendas is, okay, they're going to find out that these special ops are already in Syria. We might as well just say we're sending some over there. But they're already there. And a lot of these special op guys are cleaning up the Islamic State intelligence information, cleaning up the evidence, just in case. Because they know sooner or later, Syria, Russia, they're going to be getting into these areas. And we know the United States has boots on the ground in Iraq. They're all in combat, as per the Pentagon officials. And the Iraqi people and the Iraqi government saying that we do not want the troops here. And the Iraqi people have started to feel that the U.S. isn't serious about fighting the Islamic State. No, they're not. They're the proxy army for the United States government. Why would they fight them? But the United States doesn't care what the Iraqi people or the government says. They're still bringing in troops. We don't care what you said, puppet government. We will do what we want. And you'll just be quiet. Even the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon condemned U.S. President Barack Obama's demand that Syrian President Assad be removed from office. He said that the future of Assad must be determined by the Syrian people, which is absolutely right. They voted him into power. If they don't want him there, vote him out of power. The UN Secretary General is here implicitly blaming all of this, lots of blood and misery, on U.S. President Obama and on the many Western countries who ally with him and have joined with him in demanding a regime change in Syria. Because all of this is a hoax. It's an illusion. Their goal is to get Assad. The Islamic State is the army for the United States. They're paid mercenaries. They're terrorists. And they're continually trying to make it look like Russia is not hitting the Islamic State. Russia is really hitting civilians. They're hitting hospitals. And of course, Russia came out and said, okay, prove that we hit the hospital. Of course, the United States can't show any proof whatsoever. So Russia did a little research on the information that the United States was pushing out there. Out of the 6 hospitals that were mentioned in the report, only 1 medical facility actually exists in real life. Russia checked this information. It turned out that a hospital is only present in the village of Sarman. They took a picture of it on October 31st and said, here is the hospital. the building is intact. Disproving the claims it was completely destroyed and 12 people were killed. The United States, silent, crickets. Remember, Russia is inside Syria at the request of Assad. Assad is giving him full support. They have access to the information inside Syria. This poses a huge, huge problem. Now, the Syrian army is making huge gains against the terrorists, the U.S. proxy army. They are pushing east. They have captured a lot of the militants' positions in the northern parts of the coastal province of Latakia. They've stormed a main command center in Deir ez-Zor, and they are just continually moving forward with the help of the air power of Russia. Now, John Kerry was out there and he's saying a decision by the U.S. by President Obama to send special forces to Syria is strictly focused on fighting the Islamic State insurgents and does not signify the United States is entering a civil war. Well, we know this is the opposite. We know that, yes, they want to get involved in the civil war. Because every time a government official or banker comes out and says something, we always know it's the complete opposite. Now, Obama is putting boots on the ground. We already had boots on the ground. And where is Congress in all this? I mean, this has been going on since 2014. And under the War Powers Act, Congress is supposed to vote on any war within 60 days of its launch. So Congress just never voted on it, meaning the war was never authorized. And here we are a year later, and ground troops are now being deployed in Syria and Iraq. Now, the authorization for war died in Congress, and nothing was ever said about it. What is Congress doing? Absolutely nothing as usual. Now, we understand the United States, they continually say, oh, no, we don't back Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. We back the moderates, which we all know it's one and the same. They're all terrorists. They're all paid mercenaries. And we see now the proxy army for the United States is using people as human shields. They're dragging them around in cages. A lot of the Yazidi women are in the cages. The Alawite civilians are in the cages, and they're using them as human shields. What does this tell you about the U.S. government? What does this tell you about the moderate rebels? They are terrorists. And all of this, the gas attacks, the atrocities in Syria, the killing of the people in Syria, all came from the terrorists. That's it. And the United States is directing these terrorists on what to do. Now, we understand the Russian flight 9268 came crashing down. We also understand that there was a video that was put out by the Islamic State, and they were saying, yes, it was us. But let's take a look at what actually happened here. The Airbus took off from the Egyptian seaside resort at 5:51 a.m. local time in the direction of St. Petersburg. Some 22 minutes later, air control, according to local officials, they lost contact with the jet, and it was climbing to about 31,000 feet. Flight tracking websites then reported a rapid, almost vertical descent. The manufacturer Airbus says the plane hit the ground about 3 minutes later, killing every single person on board. Now, how did the plane crash? Well, the head of Russian Aviation Agency has said that all signs testified to the fact that the destruction of the structure of the airplane took place in the air at great altitude. The principal evidence is that it remains of that the remains of the plane and the bodies had been scattered over an area measuring about 8 kilometers by 4 kilometers. Why did it crash? This is the big question. Is right now we know the Islamic State said they did it, but they don't have the weapons to shoot anything down. So most likely this was either a malfunction or a bomb on the plane. It wasn't from an outside missile. And we can see at this point in time the Islamic State video. When you look closely at the video, first of all, it's grainy, then it goes to black and white. But Steve Chadwick from the Royal Air Force Command Center said the following when they looked at the video, is that the plane in the video is the wrong type, because the wrong kind of fire coming from the airliner is in the wrong section. Even though the footage is very grainy, the aircraft, the engines under the tail are on fire, and smoke is pouring from that. If the engine was on fire, it would be coming from under the wing. So this video right now shows the wrong area of where the fire is coming from, and we know that this video is completely fake, phony, and false. Because if you look at all the other Islamic State videos, they're HD, clear, very well done, almost like a production crew has done them. And if they were going to blow this plane up, they would have the equipment out there focused on the plane. But you could see this is old footage. You can say they're trying to convince everyone. And this is not how it happened. And of course, they're just jumping on the bandwagon here to say, yes, it's us, it's us. But I believe that if this was a bomb, this was a message from the United States government, the coalition forces, Israel, and they're sending a message to Russia. Stop what you're doing in Syria. Back off, or more will happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.